Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 Series Rescue the Rockies. And the 2042 to 43 off season is underway. We've simmed through award season all the way to the beginning of free agency since the last time we checked in. You may remember that we moved on from our scout at the end of the last episode. Felt like we've been struggling in OOTP 26 with some of the changes to scouting, have perhaps been a little too reliant, as we have been historically, on a highly favored tool scout. And we ended up bringing on board Felix Zabala, whose scouting preference is neutral, still very well skilled. So the hope is that just kind of trying to hit the ball down the middle of the fairway with a guy like Zabala. Maybe we're not going to get any spectacular, unexpected finds, but hope that we can get more effective in terms of developing some of our farm system players and also selecting the right players in the draft and or international amateur free agency. And at the very least, we'll be playing several seasons, hopefully, with a scout with a very different preference than what we've typically gotten used to. With the acquisition of Zabala, though, although we have worked hard to scout out some of the top players on the market over the last couple of weeks, you can see we have average scouting accuracy on the vast majority of players who are potential free agents. So that is not necessarily ideal. But to be honest, this free agent class here is not particularly impressive, whether it's the major league free agents or a handful of international free agents with some experience. I don't think we're going to be incredibly active in free agency this year. We do have money to spend, as you can see. One of the first things that I did when started simming forward at the end of the last episode was move on from Mr. Casares, who is set to make a massive contract through arbitration as a experienced veteran player. He is on the market now looking for a lot less money, $16 million, although it's impossible for us to sign him. But if we really wanted him, we could have had him on board. But we did move on from him. We've had to cut back our scouting and player development budgets, at least the placeholders for those numbers now, a bit from where we've been in previous seasons. But we do have money available to spend. Couple of other things to touch upon since the end of the last episode. We had, as you may remember, 3 players where we had team options that we needed to think about. We quickly exercised the option on center fielder Mike Castro last episode. The other 2 players that we had options on that we needed to think about were longtime infielder, former first-round pick Derby Mahez, and longtime outfielder, former first-round pick Phil Dingwell. And we decided to decline the options on both of them. So particularly with us moving on from Derby Mahez, I think Scott Donovan's been wanting us to do that for half a decade at this point, probably. But we did have a lot of loyalty to Mahez as a guy who was a very good fielder, versatile infielder, really good in the clubhouse, good speed. The issue was he just never particularly was a good hitter after his first couple of seasons in the majors. With the fact that we're not particularly thrilled with the free agent pool this year, there certainly was an argument to perhaps keep Mahez and or Dingwell on the team. But I think if we can't find some improvements in the trade market or the free agent market, we're going to just actually go with a bit of a youth movement this upcoming year. We do have some talent, particularly in the infield, that's waiting for a chance to play. Part of the reason why we did move on from Mahez. Probably need one or two infielders, although we can fill those roles internally. Need an outfielder, need a backup catcher, and could use a pitcher or two. Have my eye on a few people in the trade market, but the prices for them are fairly high right now, so likely to wait and not get serious about it until the winter meetings start in a few weeks. Since we do have a couple of potential spots in the pitching staff, we are going to try to reunite with a former star of ours, Justin Gibson. Things have not gone well for the 35-year-old who was a member of 6 World Series championship squads with our team, a 4-time All-Star, and he won the Mariano Rivera Award just 5 years ago. But since we moved on from him after 2039, hasn't gone well. 5.97 ERA his first year with the Dodgers, missed most of his second year with the Dodgers, and then a 4.42 ERA last year in Kansas City. So it definitely seems as if Gibson is not the pitcher he once was, but he's not looking for a ton of money, looking for about $2.8 million, and still could be a more than competent reliever for us, given that we likely have a spot in the bullpen, and given that it's pretty certain that we will have some injuries to the pitching staff at one point. I don't mind a short-term reunion with Gibson. He's only looking for 1 year at $2.8 million, but he does want the promised role of a closer. Certainly not going to promise him that at this point. He's never really been a closer on a regular basis over the course of his career, although he was a spectacular setup man / stopper for us for many years. We'll offer him $2.5 million without promising that role, and he's not willing to consider that. He's willing to go for $2.6 million, but still wants that closer role. He's insistent on that closer role, so maybe there will not be a reunion. We'll offer him $2.75 million, not promising him the role. And he's insistent he wants to be a closer. A little odd, to be honest with you. We thought maybe there could be a reunion with Justin Gibson, but a guy who has had 38 saves over the course of parts of 13 major league seasons and has not had a WAR of above .8 in 4 years, who's 35 years old and fragile physically, but is insistent on being named the closer, is an interesting career decision by Justin Gibson. So we won't rule out perhaps trying to reunite with him down the line, but we're going to do it on our terms if we do it. And since we're not necessarily all that enthusiastic about the free agent pool this year, and we are in a situation where we have a new scout on board and need to be aggressively hitting the IAFA pool for the next couple of months, and then aggressively scouting not just our own farm system, but the rest of the league in the coming months and year, probably, until we're actually feeling like we're back where we were before. We are going to bump the scouting and player development budgets up. Basically cuts our money available in half, means we're even less likely to do anything material in free agency this year. But since I don't think there's anything all that interesting for us to do, probably start simming forward and see what we can do when we get to the winter meetings. There was a catcher we looked at a couple of years ago, Alan Bagar from the New York Mets, who I think could be a good platoon addition with Arellano. The price the Mets are asking for Bagar right now is a bit extreme to me. and I guess I don't have to talk about this conceptually. I've mentioned in the past that it's been tough for us to find an acceptable catcher over the last few years through the trade market or the free agent market, and you can kind of see why here, just looking for a catcher who's a little bit above average defensively, who's not a total disaster at the plate. And there are really only 8 of them or 7 of them. Danny Eberhard is a free agent, but although our scouting accuracy on him right now is low, you can tell from his personality that he's got some issues. And I do remember from looking at him at the past when we had higher scouting accuracy with our longtime scout that he has some pretty negative personality traits. So not thinking about bringing him on board. But Begar to be our starter as a right-handed hitter against left-handed pitching is signed for the next 3 years to the Mets at $5 to $6.5 million a year, which is expensive for the right-handed batting portion of a platoon. But we do think he can be a productive hitter against left-handed pitching, and he's got a decent glove. The issue with Begar, as I noted, is right now the Mets will only take Mike Castro or Carlos Bear Barrel Davila for him, which I think is absolutely ridiculous and certainly not going to give either of those players for a guy who's really a platoon or backup catcher in a trade. The hope is that his price may be a little more reasonable when we get to the winter meetings, and if so, perhaps there might be an opportunity to bring on board Mr. Begar. If you're wondering what happened as far as award season, it was a very quiet award season for our Colorado Rockies, and for the first time in over a decade, manager Toby Stavelin did not win the National League Manager of the Year. That definitely puts our 95-67 record and loss in the divisional round of the playoffs into perspective, because Stavelin has dominated that award over the last, as I said, decade plus. The big awards in the American League, Juan Salazar of the Orioles was your unanimous Cy Young Award winner. 20-3 record, led the league in games started, wins, ERA, WHIP, FIP minus, and pitcher WAR. Had a brilliant season for the Orioles, and he is now a free agent. Great timing by him, looking for over $50 million a year though, so not really realistic for us. Salt Lake's Mario Madonia was your National League Cy Young Award winner, 15-9, led the league with a 2.36 ERA, 2.49 BABIP against a 5 WAR, striking out 229 batters and allowing only 10 homers over nearly 200 innings pitched. Jesse Hoffmeister, who's going to likely be our number 2 starter going forward, 14-11 record, led the league in strikeouts, WHIP, and quality start percentage with a 5.5 WAR, finished second in the voting. And our ace, Leo Martinez, who you can see his stuff is finally, we think, starting to regress. Admittedly, it's a new scout scouting him. Finished 4th in the Cy Young Award voting, 11-7, while leading the National League with 210 2/3 innings pitched, 1.6 walks per 9 innings, and he tied with his teammate Mr. Hoffmeister for the league lead in quality start percentage while putting up a 5.2 WAR. Your American League Most Valuable Player, Xavier Sanders of the Boston Red Sox, the 28-year-old second baseman, had another monster year. Hit 305 while leading the league in runs, home runs, slugging percentage, OPS, WRC+, and WAR. The 28-year-old has won 3 consecutive MVP awards for Boston. Jesus Mendoza of the Pittsburgh Pirates was your National League most valuable player. Led the league with 51 homers, a slugging percentage over 600, and an OPS of close to 1,000, while putting up a 7.6 WAR, stealing 33 bases, and both scoring and driving in over 100 runs. Carlos Bear Barrel de Villa, who we can trade away for a backup catcher if we want, finished 5th in your MVP voting. Kevin Roberts Jr. and Mike Castro also got some down ballot votes. And as we start moving forward towards the winter meetings, I guess the last thing to catch you up on is what we're doing in the development lab this year. First baseman Mario Manriquez is on track with a gap power program in the relatively early going. Outfielder Tom McNeil and third baseman Alex Gamez also working on gap power, although both of them are frustrated in the early going. Nils Marquis Mensch trying to work on a generate bat speed program again this offseason after some poor clicking by us cost him a potential good result in the same program last year. Makoto Hirota, the young pitcher, working on his control. The reliever Ryan Harville working on pitch movement. A couple of prospects, Steve El Rubio Wheats working on his plate discipline for the young infielder. And then Matthew Vance, the college pitcher who we picked in the second round out of Cal this past draft, going to be working on improving his control. Vance, listed as the number 51 prospect in baseball, was 2-0 in 3 starts in Fresno, didn't allow a single earned run. Moved him up to high A ball where he went 2-1 with a 3.41 ERA over 6 starts. And then he made it all the way to Double A Hartford as a 21-year-old where he was 1-1 with a 4.67 ERA. So a decent introduction to professional ball with a 1.9 WAR across 12 starts at those 3 levels. But he did walk 26 batters and give up 6 home runs. We do think he can do better with both his control and his movement. And as I noted, we're going to focus on his control, at least initially in his first foray through our development lab. And we've simmed ahead a couple of weeks, made it to the winter meetings, so we're going to spend some time offline exploring trade opportunities before we pause, check in on Mr. Bagar and see if maybe the Mets are a little more reasonable in what they're looking for him. I guess technically they are a little bit more reasonable because we could also give them one of the premier left-handed relievers in all of baseball in Jason McKinney, and that would get the deal done too. But it seems like they are a little more receptive to a deal, so maybe we'll be able to work something out with Bagar. If not, there's plenty of other fish in the sea, so to speak, for us to consider about. Looking at the free agent pool, none of the big free agents seem to have signed yet. Catcher is unfortunately weak. Our old buddy Mike Gerard on the market. Still love his glove. Not much of a hitter, but at least he'll still knock a few balls out of the park against left-handed pitching. Issue is he's going to be 32 years old in a few weeks. He's wrecked physically, and he's looking for almost $16 million a year. And we would intend to be using him as a platoon catcher. So it seems a bit excessive to me what he's looking for. Pitching-wise, Freeman, Salazar, the top pitchers on the market still out there, along with our former pitchers Casares and Gibson, among others. So not too much moving at the top end of the free agent market this year, but it's also not an incredibly attractive free agent market, unfortunately. And we've spent a lot of time offline trying to find something for us to do in the trade market this year. And unfortunately, I think as I spend more and more time with this off season and what we could actually do in a trade and what's actually available on the free agent market, I think it's going to be a very quiet off season for our Rockies, and we're going to go with a bit of a youth movement to fill out, say, the 22nd through 26th spots on our roster, see what some youngsters can do, and then potentially try to reset next year. The target that I was hoping to maybe do something with was the catcher, Alan Bagar. He's 30 years old, signed for the next 3 seasons at a reasonable amount. Above average defensive catcher. The bat certainly isn't special. He is better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching, and we had envisioned him as part of a platoon, but admittedly the 200 to 250 at-bat part of the catching platoon, and perhaps not even that, depending on how many lefties you face in a given year. But there's just no realistic way to bring him on board. I know sometimes there's some of you who don't like it when I make any trades because I'm taking advantage of things, but honestly, at the hardest setting, 99 times out of 100, we're the ones getting ripped off. So the 1 time in 100, and I do review a lot of trades to be fair, that we can find something that I think is reasonable for us. We do tend to try to do it. But this one, there's just no possible way that I can justify what the Mets are asking for. As I mentioned, the best trade I could put together to pick up Bagar has us shipping off the catcher Elliott Bedford, who was our catcher against the left-handers last year. He's not as good defensively, and honestly, he's not as good offensively. But he's younger, but he certainly is not as good as Bagar. I would obviously trade him straight up for Bagar in a second. The issue is what else we have to add in. Starting pitching prospect Dave Huerta, scouting discovery, who looks like at this point he could be a useful major leaguer. Admittedly, he's only 19 years old, went 5-0 with a 2.70 ERA in the DSL for us. Who knows how he's going to develop, but he's a lottery ticket. Closer Chris Davis, a 21-year-old, a former 9th-round draft pick, who's actually, oddly for us, developed pretty well. Split last year between rookie ball and A ball, sub-3 ERAs at both levels. The 21-year-old, if he can harness his control, looks like he could be a useful right-handed reliever. Starting pitcher Ezekiel Caban, who was a second-round pick of ours 4 years ago, looking like the best case scenario for him is kind of a useful major leaguer. He was 8-7 with a 4.22 ERA in Double-A Hartford this past year. But then we also have to include John Jefferson, formerly a top 100 prospect. The 25-year-old is fragile physically and is not great anywhere defensively except for first base. Issue is he certainly hasn't hit enough at the major league level after he first made his debut in 2040 and was good to indicate that he should be playing first base. But still at his age and with his profile, think that there's some value there. So a backup catcher, a guy who we think can still be a useful infielder, and 3 pitchers who we think could be useful to, in the case of Davis and possibly Huerta, more than just useful. for a 30-year-old platoon catcher just doesn't seem like a deal that I can justify. So instead, we've made a much less significant trade. We traded third baseman Mo Bellamy, 22-year-old, who's coming off a year when he hit .312 with 41 homers and 139 ribbies in High A Spokane. So 7.2 WAR in the minors, and you can see he was 9.7 WAR in Class A year before. Don't necessarily think he's going to be a big-time major league hitter. The strikeouts and the contact are likely to be issues. But he can, as we've seen with 87 home runs over the past 2 years, knock an occasional ball out of the ballpark. We traded him for the 29-year-old catcher, Eric Gartman, another right-handed hitting catcher who is not as good as Bedford is right now against left-handed pitching, but he is better defensively than Bedford. And importantly, and is his first arbitration eligible year. We got Salt Lake to keep 2/3 of his contract, so essentially he's a league minimum player for us this upcoming year. But he still has minor league options this year. So at least between Gartman and Bedford, we have a choice to make for our platoon catcher against left-handed pitching, have a little more insurance in case we have an injury. And we just hope that Mr. Arellano, our left-handed hitting catcher, who's going to be playing primarily for us against right-handed pitching, can stay healthy and be better than he was when we traded for him last season. So a pretty unexciting trade when all is said and done. And as I mentioned, looking for another pitcher or two, a fifth outfielder, a couple of infielders. Looking at what's out there in the trade market and looking at what's out there on free agency, at this point, I think we're going to do very little this offseason as far as helping the major league roster. Maybe that will change if the prices of some people come down or if we get a great trade offer out of nowhere. But I'm not necessarily optimistic that we're going to be doing too much. We did increase our draft budget a bit, so that kind of explains the fact that we've lost a little money since the last time we checked in. It looks like, and I wanted to talk through this too, with almost $53 million available for extensions, that if we can just survive this upcoming 2043 season with the youth movement, hopefully half of those guys work out, and then we will have some real ammunition next off season to potentially improve the team. And there is part of that is true. But there is also a pretty significant issue that we are going to be taking a massive hit to our pitching staff this upcoming offseason. Chris Kennedy, former Cy Young Award winner, 3-time Mariano Rivera winner, is going to miss this entire season. He'll be 32 years old by this time next year. And most importantly, actually that's come down. He was looking before the winter meeting started for $30 million a year. Now he's only looking for $9.5 million a year, but still not something that we're willing to do, given that we've got huge doubts what he's going to look like after that injury. Our starting catcher next year, Alex Arellano, going to be 31 years old right when this new season is getting underway. He's looking for about $10 million a year for 5 years. And then we start getting into some of the big numbers. Reliever Melvin Reyes, who's been important for us, set to hit free agency, looking for $20 million a year over 5 years. Starting pitcher Kyle Campos, who we traded for last offseason, looking for $12.6 million a year for 4 years. Reliever Jason McKinney, big-time reliever for us, who we picked up in a trade several years ago, looking for $26 million a year for 6 years. And then Jesse Hoffmeister, who's likely our number 2 starter, looking for almost $37 million a year over 7 years. We will have that team option on Bob Russell where we can potentially get out of that. But my point is just that although it seems like if we survive this 2043 season, that we could be heading into next off season with money to spend and a good opportunity to improve our team. It's true in a way, but we are potentially having to find a number 2 starter and 3 top arms in our bullpen, addition to a guy who might be a 5th starter and our starting catcher. So I don't know that things are going to get easier for these Rockies immediately. It may be a situation where we've just got to hope that we can start finally turning out some talent from our minor league system, since the last couple of years the trickle of good players to the majors has slowed. So I'm not necessarily anticipating that too much is going to happen over the next month and a half or so. We've got the Rule 5 draft coming up in a few weeks, and then we'll finish off this episode taking a look at who's available in the international free agent signing period. I'll be spending some time offline continuing to look at some trades and peruse the free agent market, but it's possible that from your perspective, with the time that I'm offline and not recording, that just a couple minutes from now we're going to be looking at the IAFA pool. And longtime Rocky Derby Mahez, who we refused an option for this past November, has finally left. Players disappointed to see him leave. The fans disappointed as well. Mahez signs with the Tampa Bay Rays, just a 1-year contract at $1.6 million. As we've talked about many times in the past, always loved his defense, always loved his speed, always loved his influence in the locker room, but staying healthy has been an issue for him throughout his career. And in recent years, especially now that he's in his mid-30s, the bat has become a pretty significant weakness. So wish Mr. Mahez the best, but his career in Colorado is over. And it was a very quiet Rule 5 draft for us. We added 3 players to our 40-man roster to protect them. Did not end up picking anybody, and we did not end up losing anybody either. And we've made it to the new year as we continue to get closer to the International Amateur Free Agent signing period. Pretty poor trade offer from the Phillies, offering us the 28-year-old left-handed reliever Jeff Scooter Davis for our 30-year-old right-handed reliever Josh Joss. But I think Joss is a better pitcher than Davis at this point, so certainly not something we're going to be interested in. Development lab not going very well. 6 of our players in the development lab are frustrated. The only positive news so far, Alex Gomez is on track with his gap power program. And last year's second-round draft pick, Matthew Vance, is excelling with his improved control program. Would certainly love a college player, particularly a college pitcher that we spent an early round draft pick on, to finally develop for us, because it's been a bit of a barren wilderness in recent years as far as developing players with that profile, at least for our Colorado Rockies. And we're just a couple of days away from the beginning of the IAFA signing period. We'll talk through our options there and hopefully turn things over to the Worldwide Scouting Department for some advice. But a pretty interesting result for the Hall of Fame 17 years into the fictional future here in 2043. Aroldis Chapman elected with 87.5% of the vote in his 7th year, but some of the names who don't make it in would be a bigger surprise, I think, Jacob deGrom, Bryce Harper, Jose Ramirez, Manny Machado, Francisco Lindor, Paul Skeens, Julio Rodriguez, Tarek Skubal, among others who don't make it into the Hall in this 2043 season, and in some cases have been on the ballot for many years and not made it in yet either. And we finally made it to mid-January and the beginning of the international amateur free agent signing period. We've done absolutely nothing in free agency this year, and just that one small trade for a backup catcher. You can see there still are pitchers who could be useful on the free agent market here, so that's probably something I'll spend a little bit of time with offline before the next episode, seeing if perhaps there might be somebody worth adding. Position player wise, biggest name, Jose Villarreal, still on the market looking for massive money, but not too many other top end position players still available, with the exception of the right fielder Chris Piver. They're all looking for pretty good money, and I don't see where the 33-year-old looking for $4 million a year, who's fragile physically, below average defensively, and kind of an average-ish bat, is going to be a real difference maker for us. But as I said, there's still definitely time for prices to come down over the next month or so till we get to the start of the preseason. So there still may be a bargain or two out there for us, but not anticipating that we're going to necessarily find a true difference maker. But hopefully we'll be able to find a difference maker in the international amateur free agent pool. Been focused on 2 pitchers and 8 position players. Starting pitcher Eduardo Sanchez, right-hander, looking for $2.4 million. Looks like he could be a useful major league arm if he reaches his full potential. I do have some questions about his control. Can't see him being the direction that we end up going. Reliever Jesus Tinoco, looking for $3.6 million. We think his stuff could be filthy to go along with really good movement on his pitches and slightly below average control. As a 17-year-old, his fastball isn't too far off major league quality. We think he can also pair it with a filthy change down the line. Borderline stamina to perhaps think about getting lucky and turning him into a 4 or 5 inning starter if we could get him to add another pitch. Ground ball tendency is going to get up to close to 100 miles an hour if he reaches his true potential. But he is fragile at the age of 17, looking for a lot of money. The stamina is limited. We think the control is limited. And in addition to getting lucky and adding a third pitch, also going to need that change up to develop. So I think with Mike Tinoco's demand and some of the issues we outlined, I'm hoping he's not going to be the direction we want to end up going. There are 8 position players we've been looking at more closely over the last several months, and we've had 2 different scouts looking at them with the change we made to our scouting department. Shortstop Alberto Lopez, 17-year-old Dominican. Think that his contact can be above average. Think the gap power can be incredible with an above average eye. Like the potential infield skills, he's got decent speed to take advantage of that gap power, high baseball IQ. The knock on him is he's not going to hit too many home runs, but think he could be a pretty solid major league infielder, also known as Hickory Bob, the switch-hitting shortstop looking for $3.2 million. Certainly prefer him to either of the pitchers. Center fielder Daniel Zamora looking for even a little bit more, $3.6 million. 16-year-old has some very positive personality traits with a high adaptability, work ethic, and baseball IQ. Think he can be a good, solid defensive outfielder with decent range, a decent arm. And we think the bat can be a bit above average in everything. BK Zamora, interesting looking prospect. I think I'd lean towards Lopez over him. Some competition for Lopez, though. Another shortstop, Pedro Perez, looking for $3.2 million, exactly the same. The contact and the gap power jump off the page. Love the durability. The home run power in the eye, though, both below average. The glove is okay, but definitely not a major league shortstop glove. Has decent speed, like the high loyalty and work ethic. Don't love the low leadership. So of the first 5 prospects we talked about, I'd still be leaning towards Alberto Lopez, but this is a first view of them with solid scouting in most cases, but certainly not perfect, given that we did have that disruption in the middle of our scouting. If we want to go for a potential bargain, catcher Roberto Garcia could be the guy. Supposedly looking for just $180,000. Some positive personality traits. The glove looks fine. Not typically the type of bat profile that we'd go after. We think the contact and the avoid strikeouts in the eye are all going to be a little below average. But if he's really only a little below average in those things, decent glove, decent personality, we think he can hit a ton of home runs, and he could be a left-handed hitter. Perhaps if his development ends up such that he is better against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching, and certainly with the very limited information we have on him at this point, don't necessarily anticipate that that will be the case. But with his profile, could certainly be a useful platoon catcher for us. The last 4 players, though, are the big hitters, figuratively, and in some cases you'll see literally, all have 80 potential according to our scout. So a big step up with these final 4 players we're going to talk about. I'd say of the first 6, Alberto Lopez remains my favorite. Another shortstop, Johnny Wito Yatarte. Incredible speed, solid glove. Don't love the low baseball IQ and the fact that he relies too much on his natural talent. But certainly an interesting bat, above average contact. We think the gap power and the eye could both be incredible. And the power looks like it could be slightly below average. Certainly at this point would have Yatarte and Lopez as my 2 favorite players. But fortunately there's still 3 more to think about. Yatarte, for those who are wondering, set to request $2.6 million. $2.2 million request from another shortstop, Jose Shook Martinez. He is a bat, like the durability. I think the contact can be above average, and think the gap power, the home run power, and the eye can all be well above average to borderline exceptional. The glove is not special, but he does have high adaptability, work ethic, and financial ambition. Clearly, if you bring the 16-year-old on board, you're hoping that that bat becomes something very special. Realistically, he's probably a first base type, but with that bat, if it reaches his full potential, you'd happily have him there. $3 million demand for a player who's already listed as a first baseman, Hugo Mr. Coffee Mancera. Not great defensively, low baseball IQ, contact below average. I think he's going to strike out an insane amount of times. Not going to be good in driving the ball into the gaps, but given his awful speed, that doesn't really matter. But Mr. Coffee potentially has Ruthian-type power with a Ruthian or Bonds or Henderson-type batting eye if he reaches his full potential. So he could certainly be a interesting player. And last but not least, another shortstop, Jesus Luscious Luke Lacosta. Decent-looking infield prospect, like the high adaptability and baseball IQ. The contact a little better than some of the other shortstops we've talked about. Potentially exceptional gap power with good speed, slightly above average home run power, and an average-ish eye. So Luscious Luke is an interesting option as well. I'd love to hear what the worldwide scouting department is thinking to help hopefully guide me to a good decision. LaCosta looking for $3.4 million, by the way. He's a very interesting prospect. I think I probably have him fourth on my list. The three guys ahead of him on my list are also shortstops. Jose Martinez, a lot to like about him, particularly the bat. Johnny Huituarte, also known as Huito. Exceptional speed, pretty interesting glove, and a bat that's different but interesting. Martinez looking for $2.2 million. Huituarte looking for $2.6 million. And then I still do have a bit of a soft spot for Alberto Lopez. Like the glove, like his base running instincts, and like everything about the bat except for the lack of power. I think Hickory Bob probably is third on my list, though. And I think I could certainly be convinced that LaCosta's better than him. I could probably be convinced that LaCosta's the guy to pick. But to me, Johnny Huituarte and Jose Martinez are the 1 and 1A of my list in the very early going of trying to figure out which direction we might go in the international amateur free agent pool this year. And with that, we will finish up the episode. As always, thanks for watching. Would love your comments on what you might suggest doing in the IAFA period. And if you've got other suggestions on what we might want to do with this squad in this very quiet off season, would love to hear those as well. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.